What is up, everybody? Welcome into Shout, a Buffalo football podcast. We are here. The wait is over. The heavyweight fight that everybody has been waiting for all off season, training camp, preseason long, is here. Bills versus Ravens week, the rematch from the divisional round game that went down to the wire. And I'm bringing on a special guest to kick off the week here on Shout, Jeff Zrebiec from The Athletic. Jeff, thank you so much for taking some time to talk about this game. And I'm sure you're feeling it within Baltimore Ravens nation, that this game, it just feels a little bit different to open up with this kind of game.
Yeah, it does. I think it's always, there's always something added to it when, from a Ravens perspective, when you play the team right out of the gate that knocked you out of the playoffs, like, not too long ago, 7 months ago or whatever it was. So, yeah, I think that definitely adds to it. Then you got the other elements. You got, two of the best teams in the AFC, kind of an early litmus test, I guess you could say. You got the two, Josh Allen won the MVP, Lamar Jackson was second, so there's always going to be a referendum on that, whether it's fair or not. So yeah, I mean, why not, right? Let's I think when that last season ended and we knew this game was on the schedule, you had to know it was going to be in a featured spot on the NFL calendar. So why not do it in week one? It'll be fun, tons of storylines.
Folks can read your work over at The Athletic, and I got a head start on the week reading your Lamar Jackson feature about the role that he's kind of taken this offseason to, become a louder voice, maybe talking in a different way. What have you noticed, and I very much recommend people go check out the story. What have you noticed just being around him throughout the summer that might be different? Obviously he's getting older, he's maturing, but from your perspective, as he embarks on this season, what's been the biggest difference that you noticed?
I think, maybe it has a negative connotation, and I don't mean it like that, but he's just been pretty edgy, right? Like he just, he's always very competitive, and like when he throws an interception in training camp or whatever, you see the motion, you see once in a while you see the helmet tosses. If there's a bunch of penalties, pre-snap penalties, occasionally you'll see the punt to the football down the field in frustration. I mean, he's always been like that in a lot of ways, but it was just more consistent this summer. That it just seems like the sense of urgency has ratcheted up a little bit. And I think everybody saw, and because, AFC North was on Hard Knocks last year, and the final game of the Ravens season was featured, and, they showed Lamar Jackson in the locker room after the game, at your place, just, saying he's sick of this, and just, you could see the frustration of again coming up short. So he doesn't say it like this, but every year you come up short. Every year, the criticism of his playoff performance gets louder. The more pressure gets on him, the more sense of urgency is for him. And I think we've seen that all summer. I mean, he's been much more vocal with players. He's usually a behind closed doors guy where he talks to guys, but he's been much more out in the open if he doesn't like something, to say what he doesn't like, or to approach a teammate. Like, like there's one play where, there's a wide receiver and he didn't even throw the pass, but there was an interception that Cooper rushed through. That was actually a good pass, and the wide receiver just didn't make much of an effort, didn't really compete for the ball. And, Lamar made a beeline upfield to kind of get in the guy's face a little bit. And he wasn't demonstrative about it because that's not really his way when it comes to dealing with teammates. But he did it in front of the media, and there was a clear message sent that day that, look, we got to be better than this. We got to be, we got to hone in on the details and be much more, accountable with each other and all that. And that's kind of the player that we've seen all summer from him. He denies it, but the pressure mounts every year where he doesn't win a Super Bowl. I'm sure it's like that a little bit with Josh in Buffalo too. There's so much attention on it. I'm sure he feels that a little bit.
I do think like the organization, I'm sure it's the same way in Baltimore, does a good job of taking some of that pressure off of Josh, because he has to do so much. I mean, I think one of the arguments that was made for Josh in the MVP discussions last year was his cast around him on offense, outside of the offensive line, which I think is, maybe undervalued nationally. Like I don't think people talk enough about how good this offensive line is, but the collection of weapons outside of maybe James Cook just hasn't really been there. I want to ask you one more thing about Lamar before we move off of him. he had such a remarkable season last year. And just going back and looking at the 41 passing touchdowns, 4 interceptions in the regular season, you forget how eye-popping those numbers are. And then you get to the playoff game, and there was that first half with the 2 turnovers. Is that something that surprised you in that game? And was going back and watching it, I think the Bills did a good job. I think having Matt Milano in that game helped a lot. I mean, he kind of spied Lamar a little bit at times, but didn't do much good in the second half. What was your observation of why those turnovers happened in that game, especially after a season where he was so careful with the football?
Yeah, man, I think it just goes back to kind of Lamar has always been the best athlete and kind of I always say, like, if you go to a local park, you see a bunch of kids playing football, it doesn't take long for you to say, okay, that's the guy, that's the best guy in the field, right? And that's always been Lamar since he was a kid. And I think whenever there's sort of been issues and like if team's not playing well, Lamar's instincts are, I'm just going to take this game over. I'm going to do this. I don't want to call it hero ball necessarily, but kind of along those lines with, look, I need to do something here. And I think he gets out of himself a little bit in a lot of ways. And I think that's been, look, they have not played well in the playoffs. They've sort of lost their identity. This is something that's gone on for several years now. It didn't just happen again in Buffalo in January. But he's been part of it. He was very careful with the ball, and that throw to Bateman, maybe it was a miscommunication, the first interception, but that's just a throw you can't make. He was well covered. And then, Hamlin got credit for the turnover where he fumbled. Yep. I mean, we've seen that play 50 times last year, and he didn't fumble the ball. And I just think he has these moments, Matt, where the going gets tough and he wants to win so bad. It comes from a good place that he just tries to do too much. And he just he gets kind of overly excited, overly amped up on every play where, okay, this has to be on my shoulders, rather than the Ravens are at their best when they just play their game. They keep things simple. Part of that is Lamar improvising, but I think sometimes in the playoffs, he just wants so badly to win, and it doesn't necessarily manifest itself in the right way. It manifests itself by him trying to do way too much and kind of put it all on his shoulders, rather than, leaning back on what got them there. But, some of that's on the coaches too, Matt. I mean, they got to do a better job of calming things down. Like that one key play in that game was when the Bills kind of stopped them inside the 10 and they settled for a Tucker field goal. And it's just like, they called a pass to Ronnie Stanley, your left tackle. Like, I don't think that's the time to get cute. You have Derrick Henry, you have Lamar Jackson, punch the ball in the end zone. So I think the coaching has something to do with it, but there's no question. I think Lamar gets a little amped up, and you need to kind of settle him down in those key moments and make sure he doesn't try to feel like he has to do everything by himself. And I think that's led to mistakes.
Very interesting. On both sides of the ball, I feel like this is going to look a lot like last year. I mean, both teams are bringing back the majority of their starters. Obviously, some changes up front for the Bills, which I think I'm very interested to see how that plays out against Lamar and Derek. A really good test out of the gate. What's your expectations for DeAndre Hopkins?
Yeah, I mean, right now he's the number 3 receiver. And then you also have Mark Andrews in the mix. I don't think Isaiah Likely, their second tight end, will be playing Sunday. He had foot surgery on August 1st, and we haven't seen him on the practice field. He's probably out of time unless he's on the practice field Wednesday and they do a quick ramp up. So, yeah, he's, I think people, that didn't like that signing were like, well, he's not what he was. Well, that's fine. They don't need him to be what he was. Like, he's not. He's kind of not the first or second option on this team. I think what you get DeAndre Hopkins for is to make, to make contested catches, a couple times a game on third down in the red zone, whatever. The guy has a history of making big plays, regardless how old he is. So I don't think he's going to get a ton of targets. I still think Andrews, Flowers, and Bateman are their guys, their primary guys in the passing game. But I think where they'll look for Hopkins is in the red zone and on contested type plays, on big third downs. It'll be interesting because, Hopkins has not practiced a ton this summer. I think that's his way. I don't think he's a guy that feels like he needs to be out there. So, but the Ravens in the past, it's kind of been hit or miss when it comes to incorporating veteran receivers onto their offense. So it'll be interesting. I would think they'll try to get him involved early, though, Sunday, to make sure he feels a part of it. But when it comes down to it, I don't think he's going to be one of their primary targets this year.
The other injury watch for Bills fans is Patrick Ricard, obviously, what he means in the run game. What's the status of that, and what do things look like personnel-wise if he can't go? Because obviously the Ravens rely so heavily on those 3 tight ends, and then you throw in that likely won't be able to play, and all of those kind of moving parts complicates things maybe, or maybe throws a wrinkle that could surprise the Bills and be an advantage for the Ravens.
Yeah, and they put more receivers on the field, and they like that because they are deeper in receiver than they have been. Although that's not really saying much. This is Baltimore's kind of been a receiver graveyard over the years, but they do have a group now, maybe the best skill position group they've had, certainly in the Lamar era here. But yeah, it's kind of been interesting with Patrick Ricard. I mean, I think it was the 14th was his last practice, somewhere around the lines. So he's missed a couple weeks. Harbaugh has consistently said they think he'll be out of practice this week. Really, practice starts Wednesday. Monday for them was kind of a walkthrough. They had those days off, and it was kind of like, let's get back in town, have a walkthrough. So we'll see Wednesday. I mean, John Harbaugh has called it a soft tissue injury. There's been some, sense that it's been a calf injury, like a calf strain for him. They had a good fullback that really played well this preseason because Ricard wouldn't have played even if he was healthy. And it's interesting story. He's a kid from Army. He was a tackle at Army and played all sorts of positions at Army. And the Ravens got him because their offensive coordinator, Todd Monken's cousin, coaches Army. So they kind of had an into this kid. His name's Lucas Scott. And he played really well this preseason. And they kept him on the practice squad. So if Likely and Ricard can't go, I'd imagine either Lucas Scott gets the call or they'll call up a tight end as kind of a practice squad elevation. They'll add another guy if those 2 guys are both out. But yeah, I think you'll see some different formations. You won't see them go as heavy as often as you normally do, with the tight ends. But another thing I think you'll see is Charlie Kohler, who is their number 3 tight end. He's a pretty good player, and I don't think people know about it because he's their number 3 tight end. And he was a prolific catching, tight end at Iowa State, and he sort of morphed into a blocking guy here because that's the only way he's getting on the field because he's behind Andrews and Likely. But I think he'll have a bigger role too. I think he's will be one of those X factors in Sunday's game.
It's funny that's such a cool story. It's the summer of Army, apparently. The Bills had Jimmy Charlo, the linebacker that's been a star on Hard Knocks, had a great summer. He's hanging around in their practice squad as well. That's really cool. Really quickly, I want to flip gears here, but before we do, shouts brought to you by Amtrak, which offers frequent departures daily from Niagara Falls, Buffalo, all the way to New York City. Stops include Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, Albany, Poughkeepsie, and more. So many benefits of taking Amtrak, like no middle seats, plenty of legroom, free Wi-Fi, and kids ride 50% off. Riding Amtrak is an experience, a fun and relaxing way to get to your destination. All right, defensively, I feel like it was such a weird game script last year because offensively, where you had this Bills team that was second in the league in scoring, really felt like their offense grinded to a halt at times in that game against this defense. What from your perspective, are the big changes? I know they go out and they draft Malachi Starks, which I want to follow up on, but how do you see this defense being different in any way, stronger in any ways in 2025?
Yeah, that's interesting. Like a lot of the talk coming out of that game in January was, and Lamar has said it, like not taking anything away from the Bills. They won the game. They played a really good quality winning football in January, which is a recipe the Ravens have struggled to kind of find. But the Ravens felt like kind of they beat themselves with the 3 turnovers. And yeah, Bills caused those turnovers. They had to get them. But I think they felt a couple of those were more, were more on them rather than the Bills doing anything. But what gets lost kind of in that talk, and yeah, if you lose a turnover battle 3-0 in January on the road, you're not winning. But what also gets lost is the Bills won that game at the line of scrimmage, and I think on both lines of scrimmages. And I think that's what should sit in the craw of the Ravens defense. I mean, the Bills didn't run the ball like crazy. I think it was like they averaged 4.1 yards per carry maybe, but they set the tone with the running game. And I think they had 3 rushing touchdowns. And that's what should sit with the Ravens, because they don't usually allow teams to run on them. They had the best run defense in the league last year statistically. And the Bills were able to control that game with the run game. And Josh Allen played a really nice playoff football game, but he didn't really have to do anything spectacular, play hero ball in the passing game, because they control their run. So I think this Ravens defense is going to have to prove again it can stop the run. They lost their nose tackle, Michael Pierce, retired. They like to go small up front, and play a lot of DBs. They invest a lot in their secondary. They want those guys on the field, and that leaves them susceptible to run a little bit at times. Teams just, I think the Ravens get ahead of teams a lot, and the teams don't feel like they can run. And 2, like a lot of teams just aren't comfortable running the football a ton, and I know the Bills are. So they're going to have to figure out, they have to start over as a run defense. They're really good last year, not so good in that playoff game. So they need to kind of stop the run, knock the run out, and then they feel like their strength is defensively is in the back end where they can match up. And Starks is a big part of that. He could allow Kyle Hamilton to be more of a matchup player. They added 2 veteran corners, Jair Alexander and Awuzie. I don't think we'll see Alexander, or at least it's not trending that way, but they have enough cornerback depth where they should be okay there. So, not a ton of changes, but you will have a couple of young players that they're relying on defensively, and Starks and Mike Green, the 2nd-round pick, who are going to have pretty significant roles Sunday in trying to slow down the Bills' offense.
I love the model that the Ravens employed by building their safety room, going out and spending 2 first-round draft picks on guys that, have a chance to be top of the league at their position. I think the Bills have gone the opposite direction. Even at the beginning of their build, Poyer and Hyde, these all-pro players, they weren't that when they got here. They were like afterthoughts in the free agent market in 2017 that they built into that. They developed into that. And I think sometimes teams fall into a trap of thinking what they've done before can be done again. And now that's really going to be tested with the Bills, because they went out and they signed Taylor Rapp a couple of years ago, and he's kind of fitting into that Poyer Hyde role, but when he's healthy, and he doesn't stay healthy very often. And then you go out and you draft Cole Bishop. They finally spend a day 2 pick there, and it's just been issue after issue with him. So much so that the 5th-round rookie, Jordan Hancock, when Bishop was injured in camp, they were talking about maybe him pushing Cole Bishop for that job if he didn't get back in time and prove that he can be that second safety. Now it appears Bishop is going to start the season, but in terms of Starks and Hamilton, from a organizational approach, why did the Ravens go that direction to go and get Hamilton and then come back and spend another 1st-round pick on the position? Because I think it's something that the Bills can maybe study and learn from.
They're big on kind of, they call it, positionless football, right, on the defensive side. And they feel like getting a lot of versatile DBs who can do different things, cover in the slot, go outside, play the deep part of the field, play dime linebacker. And they feel like you have as many of those guys, good, athletic, versatile DBs out there. It allows you to match up better with certain offenses, with different offenses you face in today's NFL. And I think that was a big, Starks can do a lot of different things. He can be that deep safety if you want to move Kyle Hamilton close to the line of scrimmage. I think people kind of forget, like, Kyle Hamilton morphed into the deep safety role only by necessity last year. Like, they were awful in the beginning of the year, getting balls thrown over their head. And, Marcus Williams had a really difficult year. He ultimately got benched. Eddie Jackson, they brought in from the Bears, ended up getting cut because he was giving up plays. So they felt like they needed to put Kyle Hamilton back as a deep safety to sort of organize the back end of the defense. But they didn't want to do that. It was just sort of had to happen to kind of fix their defense. And he's good enough to play wherever. But I think they want the ability to maybe move him closer to the line of scrimmage at times, to match him against certain tight ends at times, to blitz him at times. I mean, he's their best defensive player, with all due respect to Roquan Smith. And Starks can do that, because he's not as big and physical as Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton's kind of a unicorn in a lot of what he does, but he has those qualities where he can match up and he can play deep safety and he could do different things. And I think that's the way they believe in building a defense now. They like disguising. They like confusing quarterbacks. They like quarterbacks not knowing kind of who's going to be where and where they're going to be lined up. And kind of Starks is another chess piece to sort of add to the mix or that could help them do that.
I wanted to ask you one more before I get you out of here. You had Tre'davious White. You covered him for what was it, 3 months last year. I went back and looked at that game, and actually, Pro Football Focus had Tre'davious White graded as the top defensive player in that game against the Bills for the Ravens defense, which surprised me even, because just thinking back to the game, watching it again, what were your impressions of him and what he did in a short period of time? He's been hurt about a week now. I think the Bills think that he could play on Sunday. At least they're setting it up that way. We'll find out more tomorrow if he's practicing. But what were your impressions of Trey?
A good dude, first of all. I was very, this is a guy that came with some accolades. And, what the Ravens traded, I think, a future 7th for him. It was as like he wasn't playing with the Rams, and he really helped them down the stretch. Now, they used him as a rotational guy. He didn't play every snap, and I think that probably helped him get to the finish line healthy because he's had some injury issues. But he played well. He played well for them, and in fact, I think he got sort of the short end of a call there in Buffalo. Like I think he got called for pass interference, and I don't think that look, the game was not decided on that by any means, but I think that was a tough call on him. But I do remember him playing pretty well in that game. And down the stretch, he gave them another cover corner that they sort of can trust. And, when they got him, it was sort of like a why not? We're a little thin at cornerback. We're always dealing with cornerback injuries. We get this guy for virtually nothing. If he struggles, is hurt, it's whatever, we didn't really give up anything for him. And I think he was a real pleasant surprise and a real good dude to be around for a lot of the young cornerbacks they have in the room. In fact, I thought they'd resign him. I mean, I don't know, sound like he wanted to go back to Buffalo, which is great, cool story. But I don't know how interested they were at times, but he played well enough to be brought back for sure.
Really cool story. I'm sure we're going to have a bunch of cool ones to write after this game on Sunday. Jeff, let everybody know where they can find you. Obviously, your handle over on X is up on the screen, but anything you got coming this week?
Yeah, it's a good week. In fact, I think, we're waiting to talk to Mark Andrews. As you know, Matt, he's going to be a big story this Sunday, whether or not. And, Mark for months has heard about his shortcomings in Buffalo. And, that's a proud guy who takes it very personal. And, from fans wanting him cut and all this talk about his contract situation. So it'll be big to catch up with Mark Andrews this week. I'll probably take a shot at doing something on, Josh and Lamar again, another meeting between the two. I think one of the interesting things about Lamar is he does not pal around with quarterbacks. Like he's not friends with any of them. And it's nothing personal. Like it's just the way he is. There's not another opposing quarterback who he's close to. That's just, but you can tell the respect that he has for Josh Allen whenever he talks about him. And we saw that on display after the game in January a little bit when, he kind of told them to go win it. So, it'll be a fun week. A lot of storylines. It feels like it's come on fast and there's only a couple days here, but it'll be cool to get up to Buffalo and actually see some good football.
Great stuff. I'll see you on Sunday in the press box. Make sure you follow all of Jeff's work over at The Athletic, and we'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Take care.